Hey, what's up? This is Tone Architects. I'm Jeremiah, and I'm going to show you my polysustain preset. All right, so let me walk you through. We'll hop over into HX Edit, and basically just got simple volume pedal set up. Next up, we have a Ampeg Opto Comp, and the compression is at 5. Release is at 2.5. Mix is at 55%. Next up, we got a tube screamer. And that is assigned to foot switch 2. We've got gain set at 3, tone at 5, and level at 10. Next up, we got a split, an AB split. And this is routed to, you go over to this. We're routing it to foot switch 8. And the way I have it set up is the min set to A100 and max route is going to go B15. You can kind of tweak that, see if you want to give it a little more. The sustain kind of like starts behaving a little weird if you go like full on 100% B. There's like kind of a weird, you hear it like switch on and off a little more obviously. Okay, so there's the split, and then we go down to our polysustain, which I have the interval set to 0. Attack is at 100 milliseconds, 3 seconds for the decay. Mod frequency is 3.0. Depth is 0.2. Effects level I have at 10. Random depth at 0. Random speed at 1. Level, give it a little boost at 2.5 dB. Auto EQ I leave alone, and normal is left alone. But we also want to route this. We want to route the bypass to foot switch 8. And one thing I forgot to say about the split is we're going to route both of these to foot switch 8, but the type is going to be momentary. So momentary for the split and momentary for the bypass of the polysustain. And then you can drop your favorite amp. What I'm using here is Placator Clean with the drive at 4.2, and I'll say that's kind of my single coil drive. If I'm using like a Les Paul sound, something with humbuckers, I'll probably scale that down to like 2.8. But this is great for like tellies, strats, whatever. That's at 4.2. Bass is at 5.0. Treble at 6.4. 3.3 for the presence. Master's at 10. 7.1 for channel volume. Bright is left on 2. Sag I brought up to 8.5. Ripple I leave alone, and bias at 6.1. Then we're going to come over to the output settings. So path 1A is going to come down to path 2A, and our polysustain path 1B, is going to come down to path 2B. I also added a little bump on the level of that to 2 decibels. So all right, let's come to our path 2A. It's got some hot springs, reverb, stereo reverb, set to 4.2 on the dwell, 2.0 on the spring count, low for the drip, 200 hertz, and 4.0 kilohertz for the low and high cuts. Mix I brought down to 15%. Just want a little bit of a subtle, just a little subtle spring reverb. Nothing too crazy. That I don't have assigned to a foot switch because I just want to leave it on. And so next up, we've got a new, thanks to 3.50, We got a new dual cab block. Went with the Moon 412, the 906 dynamic cap edge. I believe these are all default. Put the angle to 0 instead of the 45 degree. Low cut is left alone. High cut, I bumped it up a little bit to 14 kilohertz, just because I wanted just a little more brightness to it. Levels 0, and then pan all the way to left. And then for our second cabinet, I use the Mandarin 412, I believe with the default mic and position and distance settings, although I angled this one 45 degrees. Low and high cuts are off, level is 0, and the pan is set to 100% on the right, and then we add 20 millisecond delay. That's a cool feature of 3.50. Being able to include that delay in the cab block keeps you from wasting a delay block to get that stereo separation that we all love so much. All right, so next up, jump down here real quick. So this is our poly sustain path 2B. I dropped in a compressor, so the signal goes into the poly sustain and then straight into a compressor after that, just to kind of smooth things out, keep it from getting away from you too much there. Threshold's at negative 37.1. I believe that's default. 6.1 is default. So then attack is at 38 milliseconds, 200 milliseconds on the release. Mix is 100%. Level I brought down to 0, and knee I believe is default at plus 6 dB. So again, that's just to kind of smooth it out. You can play around with this, see if you really want to make things a little more compressed. And I would also recommend messing around with a 3-band comp if you want to like get more lows or highs out, or compress them, those individual frequencies. That's always fun to play around with. Next up on path 2B, I've got the compressor is not assigned to any foot switch. Retro reel for after this is just if you want to add some effects to the poly sustain, this is what I'm doing. So the bypass is at foot switch 9. Then we got wow and flutter at 5.2. 0.7 for saturation. Low cut's off. High cut is off. Tape speeds default at 15 inches per second. Level 0 and texture is 4.2. And then next up we got tape eater, one of my favorites from 3.15. It's in the legacy folder, and we have it assigned to foot switch 10 for the bypass, and then I have assigned feedback and flutter to foot switch 11 as they like cut the feedback and boost the flutter. So I'll show you how to do that real quick. For foot switch 10, we're at 80% feedback, 55% flutter, distortion down to 1%, and mix to 5%. So that's for the bypass at foot switch 10. Now what we want to do is jump to feedback. We'll assign that to foot switch 11. And the min feedback we're going to set to 80%, max feedback 5%. So when the foot switch 11 is turned on, we're jumping to max feedback and the minimum feedback. So it's maybe a little backwards to you, but that's the way I did it. So all right, next thing we did was the flutter. We also assigned to foot switch 11, and I put the minimum flutter at 55% and maximum flutter at 100%. And so you can see those. Foot switch 11 on, foot switch 11 off. Cool. All right, so back up here we got another split. This is a mixer split. Just keep everything default. So basically our poly sustain is going from path 1B to path 2B, getting compressed and a couple effects, and then back up here to merge with path 2A to get some delay and reverb. And then another phaser at the end. All right, so for the delay, I'm using the crisscross stereo. Pretty much everything is set default, except for the mix is down to 24%. Next up is the dynamic hall. I want that in stereo. And decays at 4 seconds. Pre-delays at 50. 20 meters for the room size. Diffusion I cut down to 35%. And dampening is also, dampening I think is the same at 3.75. Mix is the same. Again, this is all stuff you can kind of tweak however you want. Assign this to foot switch 4. Forgot to say that the delay crisscross is set to foot switch 3. And rounding everything out, we got the script mod phase in stereo at foot switch 6. With the rate set to 0.1, spread at 5, and mix at 25%. So that's my poly sustain preset. Lots of tweaking you can do with this. Here's something cool. So we're gonna turn off all these effects and get a random depth thing here. If you want to bring in a little glitchiness to your sustainers. So that'd be something cool to set up on a snapshot, or maybe have a snapshot that's glitchy stuff and a snapshot that's more straight up sustained. So yeah, more videos coming soon.